Hi everybody. I get to tell you about the month I was born in and the year, believe it or not. I was born in June of 1969. Yes, ladies and germs, that was 49 years ago. And in 1969, one of the major events was the Vietnam War. It came to an end sometime in the 70s, but during the 60s, what was considered the Summer of Love, this horrible, horrible war was happening. Thousands of troops were sent to Vietnam, and many of them never came home. It was also, when I was born, the end of 1969. And there were a lot of things happening in that time. Unfortunately, in June, I missed a couple of the really good things, which actually happened in July. So one of the things in June of 1969 that is memorable is Richard Nixon, the then president, met with the president of South Vietnam. And in their talks, he vowed to bring home 25,000 American troops. That was a big thing because it was the wrapping up of the Vietnam War. It was the beginning of the withdrawal of the troops. And unfortunately, those troops were met with horrible, horrible prejudice when they returned home. Some of the other things that were interesting for this time period were Warren Burger was confirmed as the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. And he was on the court for quite a long time. He was a Chief Justice, and some of the landmark rulings from the 60s and 70s happened while he was Chief Justice. Another thing, we're going to go into the area of entertainment for a minute. Everybody knows who Dorothy is from The Wizard of Oz. Well, her name was Judy Garland, and she was a child actor who came up, and she was a wonderful singer. If you guys get a chance, listen to some of her other songs other than Over the Rainbow. She lost her life in her home in London in June of 1969. It was a very sad day. Her daughter Liza Minnelli, if anybody knows who she is, she's also was a wonderful singer and actress and other, just everything. She did acting, singing. She was an activist. That was her daughter. Another landmark entertainment fact for all the Trekkies out there, the last episode of the original Star Trek ended that month. The last show aired on the NBC network. So all the Captain Kirk fans were very, very sad. But luckily it came back into reruns later on. Unfortunately, some of the other political issues that were happening in this time is in Hartford, Connecticut, which is very surprising. They had race wars. They're not as well known as the ones in New York and Detroit and LA and other metropolitan cities. But it was the same idea. Unfortunately, the African American community was the beginnings of this race war, and how their unfair treatment and their how they were segregated and not seen as equal people. Another fact of our entertainment, which I don't know if a lot of people know this, one of the founding members of Rolling Stones, his name was Brian Jones. He was a guitarist, and he was one of the founding members with Mick Jagger. He left the band due to some serious drug addiction, but in the 60s, that was a very experimental time in our history. Many people experimented with different types of drugs, and they would, it was the beginning of what they felt was freedom for themselves. They were against the war. They were all for free love and peace, or their version of peace. And unfortunately, this gentleman, he left the band due to his drug addictions, and then unfortunately lost that fight in July, not too long after he left the band, in July of 1969. June of 1969 was a middle part of the last year of the 1960s. In the 1960s, there were a lot of political ups and downs and backs and forths, and a lot of activism became prevalent. In 1969, this is going to the next month, but it is a fact that I think everybody should know about. In July of 1969, when I was only a few weeks old, because I've been told I slept through this momentous occasion, the first man walked on the moon. So in June of 1969, these astronauts, Neil Armstrong, who was the first man to walk on the moon, were preparing for that momentous occasion. So not only was I born in June of 1969, there was a lot of very interesting facts and a lot of interesting events that did happen. I hope you enjoyed it. Take a check out on some of those people. Judy Garland, she had an amazing voice. Bye.